Hi, everybody. I'm here today on Your Health YGK with an amazing guest. And if you are a fan of nature or being in the outdoors, then you're going to love today's show. So I'm here with Claire Beach, who is a certified nature therapy guide. Thanks for coming on the show, Claire.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you're here. So, can you explain to our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Okay, so I have always been an avid nature lover. I thought I had a pretty deep and meaningful connection with nature until I began my forest therapy training, and it sort of shook the ground I stood on. And I almost rebuilt that knowledge and understanding and relationship with nature from the ground up. It was a really beautiful and is still a very beautiful journey, going all the way back to those first favorite trees and meaningful moments and relationships as a child, those favorite places, the sound of the grass lying in the acres that I grew up on. The journey to becoming a forest therapy guide was life-changing. I'm not the same person that I was a few years ago when I began that training. And it has, fundamentally shifted my perspective on life, my relationships, and more importantly, I think, lit a fire or passion in me for repairing this cultural divide or separation that we have from nature, and what it means to the support of every individual that spends mindful time in nature, but then also on a bigger picture, how it supports the health and growth and sustainability of communities. And especially in Canada, how it can be a vehicle for cultural repair and understanding in terms of settlers and our understanding of what it means to be an Indigenous person to this country, and the reverence and respect and knowledge that Indigenous people hold, and how much we can learn.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just getting like shivers from your words right there with everything you said, like the rustling of the grass. I'm imagining being outside right now, which unfortunately I'm not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for some people who haven't heard of like forest therapy or forest bathing, can you explain to them what it is and why it is so profound?
For sure. So some people will have heard of forest bathing, which is a literal translation from the Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, which is forest bathing. And Japanese culture, from the people that I've spoken to who have trained in forest bathing, practice in Japan, understand the roots of the practice. It is sort of the prescribed version of what used to be instilled within their culture, ingrained in their culture traditionally from the beginning of time. And that is that every living being, every grain of rice, every chair, what we would consider inanimate objects,
Mm.
has spirit, is godly. And so in Japanese culture, every grain of rice is sacred. And they see and feel spirit in most things that we would consider to be, I guess, man-made. They still not worship, but revere the roots of everything that we create from everything that's man-made. And so the practice of forest bathing began in Japan in the 1980s, actually, so recent history, at least my lifetime. And it began when they started seeing a massive increase in autoimmune diseases and cancers in the Japanese population. And they were trying to figure out what is going on. Why are our hospitals filled? Why are all these people sick? And there was a direct correlation to the number of people living in urban environments, the number of people transitioning from traditional agricultural based living, small village living, to high tech and urban environments, spending far, far less time within a generation, far, far less time outdoors. And what it was doing to mental health, physical health, spiritual health, and really just this degradation of health in general in the population. And so they started studying it. They put money behind it and tried to figure out what was going on. And the nature connection was what kept surfacing all the way to the top. And so they thought, wow, what is this? And they did a number of really interesting studies that you can look up, and took sort of these three groups of people. One of them, they basically just put them in hotels, I think, some sort of environment that they could measure, right? A controlled environment. And
Mhm.
they gave them aerosols of like diffused oils, essential oils of all of these different natural trees and plants that boost your immune system, phytoncides from mainly coniferous trees. And they thought, okay, well, let's measure, changing nothing other than giving them these natural elements. Let's see what happens. And there was minor improvement. Then they took another group and gave them outdoor time, but walking in an urban setting with those added aerosols, and what was the impact there. And then they took a third group out of the city into the country on what are now very actively used forest bathing trails. And they prescribed them certain amounts of time. I think it was between 20 minutes and 2 hours a day for a period of time. I think 2 weeks. I can't remember all the details, but basically at the end of it all, what they noticed was a massive boost to the immune system of the people that were out in nature, in the rural environments, on the trails, a decrease in cortisol and adrenaline levels in their bodies, all of these chemicals that,
Mm.
stress induced,
Yeah.
can become toxic if they build up in your body. Perfect
Yeah.
breeding ground for cancerous cells, right? And I'm sure through your schooling, you've come across a lot of that sort of tied stress, breed,
Yeah.
ill health. And so they found it really fascinating that even these minor doses of 20 minutes to 2 hours multiple times over that period of time, the immune system, that boost to the immune system was sustained for a significant period of time. And so they thought, well, geez, if we're prescribing people time in nature continually, every 2 weeks, here's a couple hours, make sure you're getting out every 2 weeks, what would that do to their physical, mental, spiritual health? And that's where the practice began, was this sort of, okay, let's try and remind people of
Mhm.
how we lived, how we connected, how we spent that mindful time in nature just a generation or two ago. Let's remind them of what that is like. And because we live in a society where everything is scheduled and measured, let's prescribe it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the time that you're saying isn't even that long comparatively to, a few generations ago when we would spend like days on end, like outside farming and doing all kinds of things. And I was like, oh, 20 minutes to 2 hours doesn't sound like that long at all.
No, it's not. I mean, there is, I mean, obviously added benefit to, yeah, getting your hands in the dirt, feeling ions from water, grounding yourself, right? All of the different energy exchanges that happen when we take our shoes off and allow ourselves to ground in the forest. There are so many benefits. But it really, where forest therapy sort of be, I guess, developed in the West is when a really interesting group of people got together and said, well, hey, how can we create a practice that can easily be modified wherever you are in the world, has a beautiful standard sequence that takes people who, are coming out of their cars, meeting in a parking lot, sort of living, 90% of their time in their heads. How can we take
Hmm.
them out of that headspace, allow them to shed stress and move into their bodies, move into their senses, deeply begin connecting with all of their senses, and entering what we call a liminal space, or a space where time just kind of disappears. And
Yeah.
we have no expectations, no goals in mind. This isn't a physical activity. We're not hiking miles. We could spend 2 hours over 1 kilometer of space. And so it's about slowing down, having somebody guide you through a series of sensory experiences and offer you invitations that then you can take off into the forest and have that own sort of personal discovery and exploration. Sometimes it's joyful, sometimes it's playful, Sometimes it can bring up some pretty big and heavy emotions that you've probably done a really good job of just, cramming down there.
Yeah.
Especially recently, because we've just got to cope, right? That sort of
Yeah.
coping mechanism kicks in. And there's often a lot of things that, I'm always a big proponent for therapy, but I often find that people who are really attracted to forest therapy are those that may struggle verbally to express how they're feeling one-on-one with somebody else. Or they don't feel safe in that environment for whatever reason. Forest therapy is so gentle, and there really is no expectation at all for outcome. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is that it happens naturally. The support, the nurturing, the understanding, the acceptance that you feel when you're sort of welcomed into that forest, it's like no other therapy. It really is.
I was just gonna say, like, somewhere with no, like, goals, or we have to do this thing, or this is a timed event, like, does that exist anymore? Like,
Yeah.
apparently it does.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that people leave their phones in the car or turn them off in their pocket and say to me afterwards, I didn't even think about looking at what time it was. I can't
Oh, that's
believe
awesome.
2 hours have passed. How is it already, 4 o'clock? Um, and I'm the one that keeps track of time, and I call people back with a gentle owl call or a bit of music or something after each invitation. Um, we gather together in a really sort of simple circle, a council of sorts that, earth-based cultures around the world have practiced. Um, and so it's a very, I guess, supported experience. But the option is always there to just come and check in and receive the next invitation and go off on your own. You could have an entire walk where you choose not to share anything, and that is completely fine. And there's other walks where you may just have entered a place of pure joy and wonder and awe, and you can't wait to share every experience that you have on your walk in the forest. Um, and seeing how different each person's experience is when I offer the same invitation to everyone, it's pretty amazing.
Wow, yeah, it sounds like something that would be really cool to check out.
Mhm.
So, I think, like, what you're saying is it's very true with, like, how hard it is to just get out of our heads nowadays. We're constantly surrounded by technology and structure and
Mhm.
expectations. So offering a really safe and supported space to just let that go seems like a literal breath of fresh air in this trying time that we have. Um,
Yeah.
so then how might, going to a forest therapy session be different than, your regular, like, hike in the woods? Or
Mm.
do you offer any activities or things for people to experience during these walks?
Yeah. So, that's a great question, because a lot of people will tell me, well, I already do that. And I
Hmm.
think, hey, I used to think I did that too. I really did. I would lay back in my kayak and I would run my hands through the water and I would listen to the birds and I would think that this is forest bathing. And in many ways it is. When you allow yourself to just stop and slow down and begin to connect with your senses and let go of everything else, that is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to forest bathing or forest therapy. We go out with the kids almost every weekend. We pick a spot within a half-hour drive and we go for a hike. But there's a goal in mind. There's a lunch packed. There's, a certain amount of distance that we're going to cover. We stop along the way. We, enjoy the shade of a tree. We sit by a creek and listen to the water. But it's always about the next step. We
Hmm.
sort of have a plan in mind, right? And it's more about spending time together as a family. So there's a different focus, right? And quite often when you're out in the woods on your own, it's really hard to let go of your thoughts. or the conversations or the to-do lists, or like my husband and I find that even when we're on hikes, we're often talking about, okay, what are we going to do for dinner that night? Or what's the next day going to look like when we have moments where the kids are busy? And so I would say the first thing is that it's intentional time to
Mhm.
slow down. The second is that the guide um, opens the door to a really meaningful experience that you may not have otherwise had. So before each walk, I'm harvesting a tea from the forest that I will offer at the end of the walk. I'm walking the trail to make sure that it's safe, make sure that there's space for everyone to feel comfortable, and that there's a beautiful spot to begin our walk, as well as gathering as a circle as we go. I'm also tuning into the forest in a really deep way and noticing, is it a windy day? Is the sun warm? Is the creek high? Are there animals present? What's happening in the forest that is drawing me closer? What is it that is enriching that moment for me? And because I do that so often, and because I'm becoming far more connected to the places I guide, to the specific day of that season, it becomes easier. And so that experience allows me to really craft the perfect walk for that day, at that place, at that moment in time, for that group of people. I'm also mindful of, is this the first time that people have been on a forest therapy walk? Are there others that have been on a walk 4 or 5 times with me or more? And so what invitations can I offer that people can choose to lightly tread and sort of scratch the surface and explore, or really deepen into, if that's what they feel they need to do? The beginning of a forest therapy walk, I guide almost a meditative sit spot of sorts.
Mm.
So I'm guiding people through deep breath and grounding, guiding them through exploring each one of their senses to the present moment, and really, really allowing them to leave this headspace and arrive in their bodies. Um, and when that happens, after that invitation, I quite often go around and say, what are you noticing? And people will say, oh my gosh, my breathing is deeper. My heart rate has slowed. I'm feeling a sense of calm, or this feeling of anxiety is lifting. It's pretty amazing after that first 15, 20 minutes, the difference in the group. The energy level kind of drops and everyone sort of looks around a little differently.
Mm.
And there's a different appreciation for the space that we're in, I think. After that, we begin a very slow, mindful walk, sort of noticing what's moving around us, from the tiny grasses blowing in the breeze to the biggest movement of the canopy in the clouds, and really starting to feel the sense of the forest from our feet to above our heads, noticing what's moving within us. And sometimes that's when you start thinking about all the things that are on your to-do list. And I often say that's when we need to stop and take a deep breath and reground ourselves and just start to notice what's moving around us. And at the end of that walk, again, we kind of check in and say, what are you noticing? And it's really interesting. A variety of answers come up. Some people, it's all about the light reflecting off the water. Other people, it's all about the feel of each footstep and how the ground sort of responds to them as they're walking. And so again, the variety of experiences and answers never ceases to amaze me.
Mhm.
And then the rest of the walk before our tea ceremony is what I call partnership invitations. And as we kind of deepened into this liminal space, these invitations can range from what appear to be really simple things like, let's explore texture, or let's explore the presence of water. Maybe it's droplets on the trees. Maybe it's being held on the mosses. Maybe it's that rush of water that we're hearing. And so again, each person will be drawn to whatever it is they want to sit with or explore. And with each invitation, It brings up a little something different. So I try and have a variety of invitations that really allow each sense to be deepened. And at the end, when we gather for tea ceremony, we've spent at minimum an hour and a half, at most sometimes 3 hours if it's a special solstice or equinox walk. And we share what the walk has meant to each of us and what we may need to share to make that journey, which it really does feel like a journey by the end of the walk, what would make it feel complete. And sometimes, again, you're just passing that sharing piece by because you don't need to share anything. And
Mm.
for others, it's really meaningful for them to share, what it's taught me today is that, man, it's almost winter, and yet through the snow, new growth is still finding its way to the surface. And that's the message I needed to receive today. And you're just
Wow.
like, okay, yep, awesome.
Metaphors, right?
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's so much. What another guide said to me, I believe completely in each person's ability to receive the medicine they need from the forest on that day.
Mm.
For each one of us, it's different. So I have no expectations as a guide of what each person's outcome is going to be. For me, it's to hold space, to provide guidance and inspiration, to be a place of safety and security, and to hold absolutely no judgment or expectation. And I find when I can have one foot in that place and one foot also deeply connected in my own forest therapy walk, because I'm on the walk too,
Mm.
that's the sweet spot.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you describe, it sounds beautiful, that experience. I'm like just imagining it. Is almost this amazing sense of you facilitating people in a way that they are able to stay mindful and keep their awareness like grounded in nature, that otherwise we would get lost in thought or off on a tangent or something, and you being able to really beautifully and gently bring them back to that space, which I
Mhm.
feel like not a lot of people probably have nowadays or have even maybe experienced at all. um, so that sounds great. That was a wonderful explanation.
Yeah, I think you've definitely hit on something there. It is about giving people permission to just give over to that experience.
Yeah.
And it's okay. You've signed up for these 2 hours. Um, that's all you need to do. The rest is up to me. And so all you had to do today was show up, and you did it. So from here in, the rest is, a journey that I light along the way. I am not a therapist by any stretch of the imagination. And so I always say to people, there's a saying in the guiding world that the forest is the therapist and the guide opens the door.
Mm. That's
Yeah.
such a good distinction too, because it's so true, like what you said about people bringing their own experiences and what they learned through those metaphors. Like they kind of picked that right up from the forest, and you basically just let them help to see it.
Mhm. Yep, that's it exactly. And there's the the variety of messages that people receive. And I mean, gosh, I sound so granola when I say that. But I mean, there's no other way to describe it. People come back from an invitation and they'll say to me, this, I was so drawn by this tree. I have no idea why, but when I sat with it, it felt like I was sitting on my grandfather's knee. you know,
Wow.
he passed when I was in my teens. I've never really even thought about his death up until this day. But it's this feeling of being held um, by an elder, right?
Mm.
and being grounded, having that beautiful energy exchange that I was talking about that you can have by hugging a tree, feeling that gentle movement, maybe a sway, maybe some other sort of rocking sensation, whatever it is, who knows, maybe the smell of the tree, whatever it is that has stimulated these senses and these memories, these moments of connection. It often does bring up things that people haven't thought about in years in a really beautiful and meaningful way, in a really gentle way. And so, as I was saying, this sort of cultural repair, I feel like when people have these really meaningful moments in nature, not only are they drawing huge support and love from this connection, but there's suddenly a reverence of, that tree means a little bit more.
Mm.
That spot by the river means an awful lot more. And so this love and this desire to protect develops pretty quickly. And I think, geez, like if every one of us had that relationship with nature, we wouldn't even be talking about most of the ways that humans are destroying it. Um,
Right.
like
It wouldn't even be a question. It'd be like, why would you do that?
yeah, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So I see huge benefits from returning to that place of knowing, truly knowing and understanding our natural world. We forget that it sustains us. Every breath we take, every meal
Mm.
we eat, the bed we lie on, most of it may be synthetic, fabrications of our natural elements, but it is all of the earth, as are we. So for me, it's like I said, a pretty radical movement in cultural repair.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Do
Yeah.
you I have a random question. Do
Okay.
you have anywhere, like if you're doing forest therapy, does that
Mm.
mean that we have to go like outside of Kingston to like the wilds, or can it be done like more locally? What kind of spots are you going to in the
Mm.
community for these amazing walks?
Yeah, so good question. The range of places that people guide is amazing. There are guides that guide like downtown Boston on the fringes of the
What?
ocean, like totally urban environments.
That's
Uh,
cool.
yeah. There's a woman, an incredible Indigenous woman that guides in the city center parks in Toronto. So it really can absolutely be done anywhere. I tell people you can have your own little forest bathing session, on your porch or on your balcony. Um, you might develop a relationship with the tree that's been growing right beside your deck that you have barely even looked at before, that breaking up its leaves. And so for me, one of the sweetest spots I found was totally by fluke, and it's in the west end of Kingston, like right on a bus route.
Oh,
So
cool.
every once in a while we hear a via train go by, or the bus, or kids playing, or people walking their dogs. But it also is a gorgeous urban wild place that just, especially in the summertime, is so lush that you can't see your feet when you're walking on the trails. Like it's a pretty stunning spot. And so you don't have to go far. We're not talking like drive an hour in the car and, or head up to Algonquin for totally reconnect. It does not have to be that way at all. It should be easy, or else you're not going to do it.
Mm.
And so most of my walks have been guided at this one West End park. And beyond that, there's a beautiful rural property. A friend of mine, Laura Varga, we've offered mini retreats up there, distance retreats, for an afternoon or an evening for a full moon or something like that, with a very limited number of people. And going forward, I'm hoping to be guiding at Frontenac Park. I've set 2 dates. It was supposed to be starting in May through to October, but we've now pushed it back till June.
Mhm.
But I'll be guiding Thursdays bi-weekly and one Saturday a month at Frontenac Park, as part of their Healthy Parks, Healthy People initiative, which is really exciting. And there's a few other gorgeous local spots too that are within, half hour, 45 minutes of Kingston, that are just pristine and stunning. I'm hoping in talks with KFLNA health unit, they've given me the go ahead that I can continue guiding small private walks right now for,
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah, so like private couples up to 4 people, 5 including me.
Hmm.
And where that happens is really up to the group. Sometimes guiding on, if they have a small piece of property, guiding on their property is a really beautiful way to get to know it in a different way. Like
Yeah.
we lived on our 10 acres for, I think, probably 5, 6 years before I started my forest therapy training. I have a completely different understanding and appreciation for our land than I did before. I know where the wild ginger grows. I know exactly where to harvest my nettles. There's a pine tree that is now an absolute dear friend and lifeline on an almost daily basis. Um, so guiding on people's properties is also a really, really beautiful way to sort of enrich and change the relationship. It's all about reciprocity. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question, kind of, sort of.
There's no right or wrong answer here.
Good, 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 good.
That brings me just one other question. How have you found forest therapy impacting people during this pandemic? I mean, obviously, a lot of people have found themselves outside more often and exploring nature because it's one of the things that's still widely available to
Mhm.
us. But I don't think, again, like they have the same kind of connection that you might be able to offer in a
Mhm.
session.
Yeah. Yeah. The pandemic has certainly seen parks and trails and biking and kayaking, and there's been a lot of increase in activity. Even crownland camping and more remote activities have increased. And I find it fascinating because so many people are reaching for the trees. They're reaching
Hmm.
for what they feel is a safe environment, that they can feel free, that they can
Yeah,
feel uninhibited, that they can leave the 4 walls behind. And I think that that's a pretty powerful message, that as a society, this is where we're choosing to be. I think we're probably spending collectively more time outside than ever before.
I think
Um,
so too.
Even through the winter, and that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. I mean, that is definitely moving mountains in the right direction. And I think that, as I was saying, when our family goes out on hikes, that is a really meaningful experience. Forest therapy is not for everybody, I don't think. Maybe it is. Maybe it could be for everybody. But those that are drawn to it are drawn to it for um, the therapy, the support, the community aspect of it as well, and the need or desire to enrich their lives. And I think when you feel that pull, when you feel that curiosity, yes, you should be going for a walk with me. Or another forest therapy guide, because there's a few. I think there's 3 or 4 in the Kingston area, or a couple in training,
Oh, cool. I
and
didn't know
growing.
that.
Yeah, and growing all over the world. Like there's a European group now that is just doing incredible things. um, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, closely tied to the Japanese community. The Global Institute of Forest Therapy, who I volunteer with, is based here in Canada and offers trainings in Europe as well. And so there's a lot of fantastic research partnerships happening right now. There's a lot of psychologists and other mental health care providers that are training as forest therapy guides. And I find that is, it's inspiring. I feel that the more people learn about the practice, the more that it's valued for what it can bring people, which in my personal, what I have witnessed is just nothing short of miraculous. Um, so when that's sort of accepted into the realm of normality, I guess, by society, where doctors are prescribing this sort of therapy for people, I think that's going to kind of pull down a bit of the hesitation,
Hmm.
hopefully, that people have with, well, I can just go do that myself. And I often say, like, well, you're a massage therapist. Like, sure, you can give your own shoulders a rub, but isn't it nicer when you spend the time and allow somebody else who knows what they're doing to guide you through that process and take care of you?
Yes,
Care of
that
you.
I think that's a big thing that I noticed too when you were describing the experiences, um, holding that space for people, which not a lot of people are able to experience very frequently, which sounded so amazing. So if people are interested in doing the forest therapy walks with you or booking a session, I mean, obviously it depends where we are with the pandemic and all of that, but how
Mm.
can they learn more and reach out to you?
Okay, so my website is amongthetreesforesttherapy.com. On there, I've got a lot of information about the forest and the therapy and the Global Institute, and other organizations. There's links to fun videos and a lot of, I think it'll answer a lot of questions that people have about what forest therapy is. It also has a number of things like the Frontenac forest bathing walks that are coming up, as well as the small private group sessions that I'm offering now. So the website kind of has it all, which is a one-stop spot for people to check out. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. That's the extent of my social media. I
What's
am
your
not
Instagram name?
Among the Trees FT.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where you can find me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about that. I feel like that was a wonderful break for everybody to just, you know, at least put the idea of reconnecting with nature back in their heads and inspire people a little bit to reach out to you or just try to get out maybe today or tomorrow for some more fresh air and,
Yeah.
grounding
Yeah.
experience.
And if you're one of those people that is has a hard time giving yourself permission to do that, put a 20-minute timer on your phone, turn it, silence it, and stick it in your pocket, and just go sit somewhere. Just go sit somewhere.
Mm,
Give yourself that 20 minutes. Don't worry about the time. You've already got a timer set, and begin to check in with your senses, hearing, smell, sound, well, sound, touch, um, all of it. I mean, really, like, just, put your feet on the ground, touch the grass with your fingers, allow your back to rest against a tree, feel the wind on your face, like 20 minutes. Honestly, everybody can do it.
that's an amazing reminder for myself to actually go out and do that.
If you go right now, you might catch the last of the sun.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show. And if you guys want to check out Claire, then follow her website. We'll put it on the links below. And thanks for listening, everybody. See you in the next episode.